Good morning, everybody. We're going to get going here. We have two bills that we're going to be hopefully executing today. And let's start out. Representative Cahill, will you lead us in the pledge, please? Thank you, Representative. Mr. Clerk, would you call the roll, please? And also, while you do that, introduce our substitutions today.
Okay, Vice Chairman Power.
Present.
And then we have Representative Sellers in for Representative Guthrie.
Present.
Clerk votes present. Representative Salas.
Here.
Representative Keller.
Present.
Representative Kelly.
Here.
Representative Arwood.
Present.
Representative Brown.
Here.
Representative Cahill.
Here.
Representative Stavis.
Here.
Representative Tatro.
Here.
Representative Trey Levin.
And reporting for duty, sir.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Gilman.
Here.
Representative Majori.
Here.
And we have Representative Rung in for Representative Mangaputi.
Here.
Representative Gallagher.
Here.
Representative Hicks.
Here.
Representative Howland.
Representative Wheeler is
sorry.
substituting for Howland.
I am here.
My apologies, Representative Wheeler. Representative Priest.
Here.
And the chairman.
Present. Okay, all 20 are here, so we will go ahead and start and open up the executive session on Senate Bill 47. I believe Representative Priest has a motion.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to make a motion to approve amendment to 47, 2023, 1970H.
Okay, I hear you would like to introduce that amendment. Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to second that.
We're going to have Representative Stavis do
Okay,
that.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, though. Representative Priest, would you like to speak to your amendment?
Yes, sir. Thank you. My amendment is simply adding on line 23 and 24, the New Hampshire Association of Regional Planning Commissions. And this also contains, this amendment also contains the changes that were made from the previous meeting. So it includes the conservation direction, and it also redirects what the makeup of the committee, basically, and other changes.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Hicks, could you clarify for us the change that might have come from a potential other amendment that is contained in here?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll do my best. In the last executive session, we had agreed, I think, to return the line about the representation from the conservation community to this, and then subsequently, Representative Priest wanted to add back in the Planning Commission's line as well. So that's why he made that amendment.
Thank you, Representative. Is there any discussion on the bill or on the amendment? Seeing none, I would ask the clerk to call the roll on 1970H.
SB 47 1970H2023. Vice Chairman Power.
Yes.
Representative Sellers.
Yes.
Clerk votes yes. Representative Salas.
Yes.
Representative Keller.
Yes.
Representative Kelly.
Yes.
Representative Arwood.
Yes.
Representative Brown.
No.
Representative Cahill.
No.
Representative Stavis.
Yes.
Representative Tatro.
Yes.
Representative Trey Levin.
Yes.
Representative Gilman.
Yes.
Representative Majori.
Yes.
Representative Rung.
Yes.
Representative Gallagher,
Yes.
Representative Hicks,
Yes.
Representative Wheeler,
Yay.
Representative Priest,
Yes.
and the chairman.
Yes.
Motion passes 18-2.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Representative Priest, do you have a further motion?
Yes, I would like to, ought to pass with the amendment HB 47.
I believe you mean Senate Bill 47
I mean, I'm sorry.
as
Yes,
amended by
yes, that's-
1970. Thank you. Do we have a second? Representative Hicks, seconds. I'm assuming, since this pretty much replaces the entire bill, you do not have much to add on this, or do you?
I do not.
Thank you. Anybody wish to speak to the ought to pass as amended? Seeing none, we'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Okay, SB 47 OTPA, Vice Chairman Power,
Yes.
Representative Sellers,
Yes.
Clerk votes yes. Representative Salas,
Yes.
Representative Keller,
Yes.
Representative Kelly,
Yes.
Representative Allwood,
Yes.
Representative Brown,
No.
Representative Cahill,
No.
Representative Stavis,
Yes.
Representative Tatro,
Yes.
Representative Trey Levin,
Yes.
Representative Gilman,
Yes.
Representative Wrong.
Yes.
You don't like me?
No, I don't. Representative Majori,
Yes.
you got me all messed up now. Representative Gallagher,
Yes.
Representative Hicks,
Yes.
Representative Wheeler,
Yay.
Representative Priest,
Yes.
and Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
ATP passes 18-2.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Any objections to the consent calendar? I do not see any. Representative Priest, I assume you'll be writing the committee report.
Yes, I will. Thank you.
Okay, with that, we close the exec session on Senate Bill 47, and we will go ahead and open up the exec session on Senate Bill 132, prohibiting cities, towns from adopting sanctuary policies. Representative Power, I believe you have a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to offer the committee amendment 2023-1983H to Senate Bill 132 and make a motion ought to pass on the amendment.
The motion ought to pass is not appropriate
Oh.
yet. We first have to have a second
Okay.
on the motion. Do I have a second? Representative Elward seconds the motion. Would you like to speak to your amendment?
Yes, I would. I apologize for the misspeak there. So this amendment is a revision of the amendment that I sent out, and it's the amendment that I shared that I received back from OLS was 2023-1960H. And when I reviewed that, there were some minor questions that I had about it, but I did want to share that amendment with the committee so that you had enough time to look at it closely. So the next day, on Tuesday, I contacted OLS to have a discussion. When I had Representative Elward and I had worked very diligently on this amendment, and I had submitted the changes that I wanted made, and unfortunately, there were some things that needed to be addressed that were not included. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go through very systematically and explain and outline the changes to the original bill that this amendment represents. So the first thing is on the cover page, which is not included with this amendment, but you will see it on the bill that was received by the Senate. The analysis was updated to reflect the changes made within the body of the bill. So if on the amendment, if you look at the very last page, you will see the amended analysis. And that would appear on the cover page of a bill. So the second change in this amendment is on page 1, line 3. An act is also amended to read prohibiting cities and towns from adopting restrictive policies. On the same page, line 7, the short title was also amended to read, "This act shall be known as the Secure New Hampshire Communities Act." Page 1, line 8, the subdivision title is amended to reflect the new short title. Page 1, line 10, the heading is similarly amended to reflect the new short title. Page 1, line 21. In the amendment 1960, for some unknown reason, there was a word was flipped. So the word in that amendment, they changed it from detainer to detainee. So this amendment 1983 changes it back correctly to detainer. Then on page 2, it would be Roman numeral section 7, lines 22 through 29. There's significant changes in that. And those changes reflect simplified language in order to make this bill more narrow and explicit. And Representative Elward will speak in greater detail to that section. Then on page 2, line 24, in 1960, there was a comma that was missing, so that was fixed, that grammar change. Page 2, line 25, a reference to 8 USC 1226 was added. And then on line 36 of page 2, the amended language is changed to reference restrictive policy. So from a high level, those are the changes to the bill that were received in this committee that are reflected in Amendment 1983. So, yeah, I'll just hold there, and I will let other people comment.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Elward, I know you have quite a bit of info on this, so would you please go ahead, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. I believe that SB 132 was born out of necessity as some cities and towns and criminal justice agencies create and implement policies and ordinances or standards for the management of aliens when encountered in the community or while in custody of law enforcement, the result of an arrest for a state crime or perhaps for a different matter related to public safety or national security. After close examination of the bill as amended by the other body, I did some fact checking and interviewed officials having firsthand experience with immigration detainers, and I felt the bill needed improvement. What this bill does not do is mandate apprehensions, detentions, or arrests, the conducting of raids and checkpoints, arbitrarily conducted investigations, or identification checks. There were claims in written testimony that honoring immigration detainers was mandatory, but the bill would have to say that. It would have to say shall enforce immigration detainers, such as found as in Texas law. So this bill is state law that is mirroring federal law, which is allowed. The term anti-sanctuary act had no contextual meaning based on fact and law. Taking to heart protesters' adamant opposition to the act's title, it was changed to Secure New Hampshire Communities Act because the bill speaks to the prevention of policies that would make communities less safe and secure. The term sanctuary policy under Roman 7 underwent a change by eliminating the phrases including but not limited to, because that language was overly broad. And the phrase cooperating with federal immigration laws was vague and subject to interpretation. For the definition to be fair and reasonable to those governed by federal immigration laws and in its application, there needed to be specificity. The federal law that expressly addresses restrictions on communications is 8 U.S.C. 1373. And another type of communication is addressed in Section 1226, which was inserted into the paragraph. One communicates with an official, not a law, so the language was changed to item A, communicating with federal immigration agency officials pursuant to those sections. Section 1357 of 8 U.S.C., specifically D, speaks to cooperation with ICE relative to aliens violating controlled substance laws. And that's a case where if a law enforcement agent has a reason to believe that an alien has not been lawfully admitted, they can inform ICE. They can request a determination of whether or not to issue a detainer or to detain the alien. And if issued and the alien is not otherwise detained, ICE will take custody of the alien. I spoke with several correctional centers, to include Merrimack and Stratford, and I obtained the policy standard operating procedure from the city of Manchester and from the state police. And both of them, Manchester says they will honor detainer notices under certain circumstances, and I believe it mirrors federal law. So based on all this research, I believe this bill affords municipalities and agencies with the ability to create so-called welcoming policies and standard operating procedures that do not provide a safe haven for non-citizen lawbreakers within our communities. Then immigrants and non-immigrants are afforded the benefit of guidelines regarding the management of any alien who is subject to federal laws governing immigration. It avoids a hodgepodge of rules that differ from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, collide with federal law, or hamstring local law enforcement officials from complying with applicable federal laws or from exercising their discretion. There's no inequities in this bill because it doesn't create a liability regarding federal, state, or state constitutional rights, nor does it impose a mandated financial burden of any kind, since compliance would be in the course of routine law enforcement duties or by contract with the federal government. Advocacy groups will be able to more clearly explain to lawfully present individuals their rights under state law. And I believe that the collective we must be proactive to keep our citizens safe and secure. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Representative O'Kellum. Representative Elward, could you turn off your mic, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of things in this amendment that I still have that I don't think that were fully addressed that were mentioned inside of the hearing was the definition of local government entity included random officials and what they said. And I think that a government entity is the entity itself and no individual, right? No selectman is representing the government. They only represent when they vote as a board. And so if a random selectman has some preferences or whatever, that should not be considered some government policy. So I have a problem with the language on line 18 of this amendment, page 2. Policy, I still think that practice, customs, things unwritten are still too vague. If you're trying to say that the government has a policy, then make it a policy, that it has to be a written policy, that this is what they're doing. And then it's clear, and you're not going to court to find out whether or not, some statistical analysis of how often they reach out to the federal government means that they have unwritten practice of not doing it. I don't think that's appropriate. So I think that we still need to work on Roman 6 there. I think that on line 22 of page 2, the restrictive policy means any policy that prohibits, limits, or discourages. I think discouraging and limits is kind of what we're talking about when we're talking about prioritization. If you say, I really would like you to actually go and patrol the streets instead of reaching out to, spending an hour or whatever on the phone with the federal government, I think that is that may be considered discouraging, that may be considered limiting. And so just make it explicit that it's prohibiting. If you say you cannot do this under any circumstances, this is what you're trying to limit. So I think those things still need to be worked on. And I think that that there is some interest in working on that stuff. And so in my overall, I kind of agree with what we did with the gun stuff and said, the federal government, you want to make rules, you make rules, you do it. That's not our problem. We don't need to be funding that, or if you fall down, that's not where the state needs to come and pick up the slack on that. And so I think as a matter of state policy that I think that this is wrong. But I'm happy to work with and allow that some of a possible amendment that addresses some of these issues might be drafted. So I also think that it would be good to put something in here that explicitly states that nothing in this act shall be constituted to prohibit the prioritization of law enforcement agency resources. If that's what the advocators of this language believe, and that's their stated preference, and I think it should be stated inside the bill also. So for those reasons, I'm not going to vote in favor of this amendment, but I do hope that if this was to come on the floor, that they'd work to address some of those issues that I still think are outstanding. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments? Representative Lascelles.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The whole concept of immigration policy is at the front of everyone's mindset at this point because of the crisis that we have that's occurring all across this country. I think the media and all of the information that is generated sometimes is harmful to actually accomplishing the ends that I think everyone has, and that's to live in a harmonious, civilized society. I think the definitions as amended here in this amendment really promote a better understanding of what our policy here in the state of New Hampshire should be, and I will therefore support the amendment.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Power.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a complex bill, and I spent a lot of time analyzing it and considering the testimony that we heard here in this committee, as well as I looked at the Senate hearing and the testimony there. And I just want to emphasize, as I see this bill, that with regards to the issue at hand, there are three approaches on a spectrum. And those three lanes, if you will, would be that we mandate cooperation. And this bill does not do that. And on the other end of the spectrum would be prohibiting cooperation through policies that are restrictive and prohibit, which some municipalities, in fact, we know do. And this bill does not, the bill does not do that. Where we want to be is in this middle lane where we bring it back to it's allowing for a cooperation, which makes it therefore discretionary. So we don't want to be at any extreme. We want to be in the middle, and I feel that this bill language does that to bring it back to allow that discretion and the prioritization of resources. And what it does do is it limits the outright prohibition, because if you think about it, prohibiting policies that prohibit or restrict cooperation do in fact take away the discretion. And I think that's an issue. And then what we end up with is a patchwork of policies, across the state, and that's not in the interest of anybody. It puts into question the safety and security of our citizens, and I don't believe that anybody, that's really what we want. We don't want that. So I just wanted to emphasize that and direct our focus onto what the bill is doing. And it's bringing back that middle lane, putting everybody in the middle lane where it allows and enables discretion.
Thank you, Representative. Further comments? Representative, go.
Oh, thank you.
Representative Clerk, go. I always call you clerk.
I've been called worse. I just want to say a few things. This bill's a bill similar to this come before this committee on past couple terms that I've been in. And most of you should know that I was in law enforcement in New Hampshire for 30 years, and I retired from the New Hampshire State Police. And I had several occasions where I've run into this thing. But most important thing I want to clarify is my entire 30 years, I've never seen a police officer stop someone based on their nationality, their looks, or anything like that. It's always been based on a violation of New Hampshire law. Nor have I ever seen a police officer ask anyone for their visa or their passport. The occasions I have seen, if in particular actions I've taken, I've stopped someone for a motor vehicle violation. I run his license, and it comes back from NCIC that there's a detainer order from immigration. I would have the dispatcher call immigration to see if they want the person detained. If they did, I would take him into custody, bring him before the district court, and he would have his opportunity in court to say why he shouldn't be detained. That's the way it's always worked as far as I understand. I don't know, again, I don't know anybody that's going out and saying, let me see your visa. I really don't see that. But it's my understanding detainers, when the federal government issues those are for very serious crimes, federal crimes that those individuals have committed. Again, I just don't want people to have the conception that a police officer are out there getting paid overtime or anything else to do any type of federal law enforcement as far as immigration is concerned, because that's not the purpose. But if we don't cooperate with the federal government, we're not going to solve the immigration problem. And again, the people that have the detaining orders are people that have committed, in my experience, serious federal crimes against the citizens of the United States. And I don't think we should promote those folks running around to commit federal crimes or state crimes against our individuals. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Further comments? Representative Power.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I would like to further emphasize and direct your attention to, on page 2, Roman numeral 7, the definition of restrictive policy. And just emphasize that this whole section is with respect to individuals that are detained by or in the custody of law enforcement for a specific purpose, and that's for suspected violation of a state law. So that's very explicit and very narrow in my reading and understanding of the words defining restrictive policy. So in my mind, that, cuts out a whole, host of scenarios that people were concerned about and spoke to during the hearing. So again, there's no requirement in the bill to cooperate with an immigration detainer. It brings it back into that lane where it's, again, it's at the discretion of law enforcement. But what the bill does do is it makes it clear that cooperation cannot be prohibited. So I hope that people understand the scope of this bill and the intent of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Trelevin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to address a question to Representative McDonald, AKA our esteemed clerk, in regards to the specific, from a law enforcement person's point of view, the specific mode of receiving that information that there is a quote unquote detainer out, which I would assume to mean, I've read this paragraph a zillion times, but I still need clarification on what that means and from whom it comes. If you could enlighten me.
Would you like to answer that, Mr. Clerk?
I would be glad to, and
Thank you.
thank you, Representative, for the question. The way it worked when I was on the job is you'd maybe run a 1021 or 1022. That's a 21 is a motor vehicle record, and a 22 is a license check, which you can check driver's licenses all over the country. And you can also request specific things for specific states on motor vehicle records. And when you run a 21 or 22, you have what's called a 1023 hit that'll come up. And that's an NCIC hit. That's a National Crime Information Center. I think that's what it's called. And that's information that's gathered by law enforcement agencies entering information like stolen guns, stolen cars, wanted people, things like that. They usually all reach to the missing persons. They reach up to the felony level. So when you run that particular name and date of birth, it may be an NCIC hit, which would show a detainer. You might do some other, again, there's a lot of John Smiths in the world, and you narrow it down by the date of birth. So you may do some further asking of the person you have stopped, or I would ask if it came up as hit an NCIC and detainer, I would have the dispatcher call immigration, advise them the information they had the person stopped on the side of the road for a particular violation, and ask them if they wanted that individual detained for one of their agents to come up and pick them up. If they said no, then I would just go back to them and tell the person that I stopped that just want to let you know that immigration would like to speak with you. Maybe you could get together with them. You're missing some documentation or whatever. But there is a detainer, but at this particular time, they don't want to come up and pick you up. If they were detained, I would take them to, I would have the dispatcher call the court and say I was detaining someone for an immigration detainer. He'd eventually go before the judge. He would plead his case to the judge. He'd probably have a court-appointed attorney. And the judge would say, okay, well, immigration has 3 days to come up and pick him up, or 4 days, or they must come up tomorrow. That's all up to the judge. He decides how long immigration has to come and pick the individual up. I hope I answered your question.
I do have a bit of a follow-up.
Okay.
My
Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My follow-up would be, how does that detainer get into the system?
It would be, again, based on my experience, and I've been retired now for several years, that detainer is put in NCIC by, I believe, immigration, or whatever the title is now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Representative McDonald, I appreciate your answers.
Thank you, ma'am.
Further comments? Seeing none, we'll ask the clerk to call the roll on Amendment 1983H.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is SB 132, Amendment 2023-1983H. Vice Chairman Power,
Yes.
Representative Sellers,
Yes.
Clerk votes yes. Representative Salas,
Yes.
Representative Keller,
No.
Representative Kelly,
Yes.
Representative Allwood,
Yes.
Representative Brown,
Yes.
Representative Cahill,
Yes.
Representative Davis,
No.
Representative Tetro,
No.
Representative Tree 11,
No.
Representative Gilman,
No.
Representative Majori,
No.
Representative Rung,
No.
Representative Gallagher,
No.
Representative Hicks,
No.
Representative Wheeler,
No.
Representative Priest,
No.
and Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Adoption fails 9-11.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Representative Power, do you have a motion on the SB 132?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion ought to pass on Senate Bill 132 FN.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Representative Elwood? Thank you, Representative. Further discussion on the main bill? Representative Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand the concern that this bill was brought forth to address. However, I don't see the effect of that concern. I think it's, I think the internet is a powerful tool. Media is a powerful tool. And I think we're being lied to a little bit. This isn't the southern border. This isn't Arizona or New Mexico or any of the other states. And I understand that people think it could be if we don't pass legislation like this. I don't think that's the case. We have immigration laws. Those laws are being enforced. A place like Peterborough, which has one of these quote unquote sanctuary laws, I talked to the chief of police there. They work with immigration. They meet with the immigration officials and they act on detainments. So I just fail to see where the solution that this bill is bringing forth. The Representative Power brought up this brings us to a middle ground of discretion. It seems to me as though the discretion is already there. and this is trying to get a win where there is none. Undocumented people or illegal immigrants are not coming from spaceships. They're not aliens. They're undocumented illegal immigrants. And I think that our immigration system goes much deeper than there are people running around our communities who need to be picked up and jailed and thrown back to Nicaragua. I think the problem is that we haven't addressed on a federal level immigration policy for the last 40 years, and we're seeing the effect of that right now on the southern border. This is where I might get in trouble with my Democrat colleagues, that there is serious chaos on the southern border. I see that, and that is as a result of 40 years of no immigration policy, 40 years of destruction in Southern America. And, frankly, doing this, detaining more people where there are not, that's not the way to solve the solution. And I think that undocumented people deserve a better solution than that. It's not open borders or welcoming everyone here. That's not what anyone is proposing. And I think we're getting lost in the conversation there when we bring the national federal immigration conversation here onto a state level where it isn't happening. It's not happening. And a legislation like this won't stop it from happening if it was going to happen. So I will be proudly voting against SB 132.
Thank you. Representative Cahill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I greatly respect and admire my colleague from the other side, Representative Wheeler. The reason why we're state representatives of New Hampshire is to look out for our people. And I think that the amendment and this bill goes a little further to look out for the rights and protect our people. So I will be voting yes.
Representative Priest.
Point of clarification, we're just discussing an ought to pass motion on SB 132.
That would be correct.
Okay, without the amendment.
That's correct. Representative Elwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Wheeler, I'd like to address your use of undocumented illegal aliens. That's not a statutorily defined phrase. An alien is anyone who's in the country who's not a naturalized citizen. So, case in point for this bill is the example of an ordinance that appears to limit, restrict, and prevent local police from fully communicating or sharing certain information with immigration officials is the town of Harrisville that enacted an ordinance in 2017. The warrant article, in part, reads that police officers in the performance of their routine duties will not ask any person about his or her immigration status and will refuse to share information regarding any person with ICE, except in cases involving allegations against such a person of violent criminal activity or a violation of New Hampshire state felony statutes. Violent criminal activity is not defined, and it excludes nonviolent misdemeanor crimes that trigger ICE's deportation ability, such as contributing to the delinquency of a minor, child endangerment, violation of a protective order, failure to register as a sex offender, possession of child pornography, owning a prostitution business, indecent exposure, shoplifting, having a fake ID, trespass, stalking, etc. So the question is, why would any community or agency want to refuse sharing misdemeanor information with ICE and give a free pass to these individuals to avoid deportation? Without releasing, removable aliens back into the community potentially exposes law-abiding citizens and non-citizens to re-offending harm. And the selectman for the town expressed his opinion that if passed, the bill would render the town ordinance null and void. Well, maybe it should. It's not the end of the world if this bill passes. The towns can simply amend their ordinances to comply with SB 132. Thank you.
Further comments? Representative Davis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Contrary to what my esteemed colleague, Representative Aylward, just said, this is not enabling legislation. This is a mandate. This is a statewide mandate. What we're talking about now is the underlying bill, which prohibits sanctuary policies. And I have a couple of questions that I would just like to put out for the good of the order. And one is, if I sit on a planning board in any New Hampshire municipality, and we're at a break in the action and we're talking amongst our colleagues, and the subject of quote unquote sanctuary policies comes up, which is now what we're debating here, sanctuary policies, because we're done with the amendment. If we're just casually talking and I say to a colleague, so I saw a story on the news yesterday about sanctuary policies, what do you think? And my colleague says, well, I'm mixed about it. I just don't know what I think. And I say, yeah, I know some good things about it, some bad things about it, but overall, can't see it where it hurt. I could get hauled into court under the precepts of this bill because I am part of a city governmental entity as a member of the planning board. Now, as a member of the planning board, I also enjoy a form of qualified immunity. So how do those two things square? I don't see where this bill is legal in any sense of the word, because it violates my First Amendment rights to speak my mind. It potentially violates the Fourth Amendment right against unlawful search and seizure, and it would immediately result in lawsuits from any number of municipalities across New Hampshire challenging its legality, and therefore resulting in huge expenditures of funds that would ultimately be borne by New Hampshire taxpayers.
Representative Yokella?
Thank you. I have to agree with Representative Wheeler about the southern border and the kind of there is a broken immigration policy in this country, and the fact that you have to wait years and possibly already have a family member that's in the United States and all of this stuff for you to be able to come here is, a failure of the federal government, and we are not going to fix that here. And there is also a lot of concern about that failure and their failure on the drug policies, kind of combining at the southern border to, enhance cartel activity and all of that stuff that is having negative effects on the United States at the southern border and as a whole. Like some people would like to see fentanyl and stuff like that. They believe that that's a negative downstream side effect of both the drug policy and the immigration policies that we have in this country. We're not going to fix that in New Hampshire. And I do think that this is kind of a reach around kind of way to get at more drug enforcement. And I'm completely opposed to the drug war. I think we've already failed, and we think it should be. I think it should be stopped, and so I don't like this from that perspective. I don't think that we should be enforcing federal drug policy in New Hampshire. I don't think that we should be enforcing federal gun policy. I don't think we should be forcing federal immigration policy. And so I think that under all of these, it's the federal government may be failing. They may be failing on a policy level. They may be failing on implementation of their policy level, but that is not really something that New Hampshire should try to seek to solve. I do like that we did not change our policy in the House, that if a bill comes out with no recommendation, then the person then the preferred motion is ought to pass, so that if any of the concerns that we bring here today can be rectified before that time, that they can offer an amendment at that time, and hopefully those concerns can be addressed. And so my hope today is that I would like to see some more work being done. Not that I will probably ever support such a policy, but I think I like the conversation and where it's headed. As far as on my side, like on the Republicans trying to explain where they're coming from. And so while I don't support the bill, I do hope for that no recommendation outcome. So thank you.
Representative Gilman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I need to talk about an incident in Exeter. And we have talked before about enabling laws that, or not enabling, but passing laws or bills that reiterate federal law, because it will be easier to find in New Hampshire law. And I think you might agree that the research through the U.S. Code is can be very dense. In Exeter, we had an incident where someone came to the aid of our police department and then was detained. He had committed no crime. He was coordinated with ICE, and he was detained and kept for 5 months at the loss of his income and relationship with his family, and the town was sued, and we lost $40,000. So I see that adopting a sanctuary policy may be necessary in order to inform our police what they can and cannot do.
Let's see here, who hasn't spoken yet? We'll go to Representative Brown. I see your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have many family members and many friends in law enforcement who basically just want to enforce the law and not be restricted from enforcing the law. So once a violation has been identified, much like Representative McDonald indicated, they don't want to be prevented from doing so. And although some people here might not think that we have issues in New Hampshire, our law enforcement people tell me that that is the case. So I just think that this law would allow us to address immigration issues when they're identified, not searching them out, but when they're identified, like Representative McDonald indicated, then it gives the ability to enforce the law. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to address what Representative Cahill and Representative Alward said, both two people with whom I have great respect for, and I'm sure you and I will be out after this, and I'm sure Representative Cahill will be talking after this, so this won't change that. But I think this is protecting our people and protecting the rights of them. I have spoken to the Manchester police. I've spoken to my police chief. I've spoken to many people in my community. Many people in my community reached out for this. They don't support this policy and its effect because they, as people who have lived there, that live here their entire lives, want a welcoming and safe community for all people. And as Representative Gilman just illustrated, sometimes it's not all criminals who are being detained by ICE and held without their will and having their lives taken away from them. It's not all criminals. It's sometimes people who are just simply immigrants who may have their documents, etc. And I think that speaks to Representative Yokella's point that we need to fix our federal immigration system so that we're enforcing the laws that are on the books and making sure that the ones that are lacking are strengthened so that situations like that aren't happening and that we don't have a border which people can run over with no recourse whatsoever. I think that's something that most people would agree with. To Representative Alward's point, if you commit some of the crimes you outlined, if you are in possession of child pornography and caught, if you are a pedophile and you are arrested for that crime, or if you commit a felonious murder, if you, et cetera, you will go to court, and that will be a decently large court case. And in the process of you going to court, getting your papers, et cetera, immigration will find you. And that is on the books as it stands. And this does not change that at all. If you commit one of those crimes, you're going to jail. And in the process of you going to jail, you're going to be found, and immigration will come and take you and process you thus far. That's happened here in New Hampshire. That's, I think, the appropriate process and how it should continue to move forward. And to Representative Yokella's point, I mean, we've got the Sinaloan cartels basically running the country to our southern border. I think the problem is far deeper than some people have crossed over in our communities. That's not the problem, and I fail to see that. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I won't speak any further as a substitute, and I appreciate your deference, and thank you.
Representative LaSalle.
I think this whole issue that's brought up by SB 132 is fundamental to our responsibility as legislators and the responsibility of government itself. We are a nation of laws. We are not a nation of men. Now, if we took a poll of all the peoples that inhabit the planet Earth, I'm sure you would find that a great percentage of them would like to leave where they are and go to a different country. And a great percentage of those would like to come to the United States. There are many reasons why people come here, but one of the overriding reasons, above and beyond the fact that their country of origin is not a safe country, it's not a good place for them to raise their children. Another reason is for the economic opportunity. So, if we have 300 and some thousand people in this country, well, if we just opened I meant million. If we opened our border and let anybody who wants to come here, for whatever reason, we would be totally inundated with people from all over the world. Our immigration system simply could not handle it. So where are we today? Well, for a long time, we had thousands of people coming across the southern border, and yes, there were too many for the people to handle down in Eagle Pass, Texas, or wherever. But they were down there, and they didn't seem to come any further. Now, where are we today? We have 8,000 or 10,000 per day coming across our border. There are tens of thousands of people that are trying to make it to this country in any way that we can. Our Border Patrol and people at the federal level who are responsible for enforcing the laws at the border simply cannot do it. They're inundated by people. People are coming in. They're totally unvetted. We have no idea of their health status, their legal status, or any other status. So all of a sudden now, we're having people show up in New York City and Chicago and Martha's Vineyard and all over the country by the busload. And oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Full disclosure, several generations ago, my great-grandfather was an illegal alien. He was arrested, and it was a half a mile in front of the local sheriff for shooting one of the king's rabbits. He stowed away on a ship and came to this country, and that was back before the Civil War. So I am, in a way, I have his blood flowing through my veins. But I get back to the point, if we are going to be choosing what laws we're going to enforce and what laws we're not going to enforce, and have people in one municipality enforcing this, and in another municipality saying you cannot cooperate with the federal law, and the federal government are the ones that are supposed to be in charge here, you cannot cooperate with federal authorities, then I think you are opening the door to chaos. Now, the impact of slack immigration policies affects us not just from an immigrant standpoint, it affects us. We have a fentanyl crisis here. I think most people admit that the fentanyl that is killing tens of thousands of people here in New Hampshire, not tens of thousands, but we have many people who are being killed by fentanyl, poisoned. It's not drug abuse, it's poison. A lot of that fentanyl is coming across the southern border. And a lot of it comes through ports of entry. Why is it coming through ports of entry? Because the Border Patrol can't handle it. So I think this bill is a step in the right direction to get things back in line, to force the federal government to take responsible policies to enforce the law. And that goes right down to the local level. Thank you.
Representative Elwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I agree with Representative Lascalis, and I'd like to acknowledge Representative Gilman's comment. For those of you who are substituting, you may not know that on January 26th of this year, lobbyist Nate Grays, our good friend, testified before this committee relative to a child tax credit bill. And he stated, as much as it chagrins me to say this, you municipalities need solid guidelines on what to do. Unfortunately, we don't have a survey of all the towns and cities and agencies to determine the existence of policies that may be in effect that conflict with federal law. So I believe this bill provides guidelines to prevent a hodgepodge of rules. And the towns can create policies as long as they don't conflict. Thank you.
Further comments? Representative Sellers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Representative Wheeler, he's half right when it comes to undocumented. Because if I go to Canada and I don't go to customs, I am there in Canada illegally, but I am undocumented. All right, so it is both, but it's basically no difference in this country. If I don't have the paperwork saying I'm here legally, I am illegally here. That's number one. The second thing I wanted to bring up is, it sounds like if you don't have a law that's a standard through the entire state, you're sowing confusion. And if I was an illegal in this state, I'd be scared to death if I left one town and went to another, and one police force was talking to another, I'd be picked up in a heartbeat. If I was an illegal, I wouldn't want to come to this state without a law at least put in place so I either know or I don't know where I stand. Because when you go to one town or another, it could just change on you.
Thank you, Representative. Further comments? Seeing none, I have two. First one is actually more of a procedural or process type of a issue. We see this not just in this bill, but in many bills. Somebody previously mentioned the internet and what goes on there. And what I want to talk about is the amount of inaccurate information that is put out on the internet. And two examples of that is one, I know many of you have received lots and lots of emails on this, and I can't tell you how many of them are just rooted in errors and misinformation. I occasionally engage on some of those, and what I have found is that there are usually talking points that are given to an individual. The individual regurgitates them in an email, and most of the time they're wrong. And when I engage the individual, 9 times out of 10, that individual has, first of all, doesn't respond to a question, but has no idea what they're talking about. And the occasional person who does respond, they don't know what they're talking about. That's troubling enough, but I'll tell you what's really troubling is when somebody testifies in front of this committee as a supposed expert, and I'm going to pick on a police chief who testified here from one of our major cities. And in his testimonies, I'm going to paraphrase it, so if I don't get it exactly right, but he made the point that he didn't want his police officers spending time rounding up undocumented immigrants. And when he was challenged on that, he went through his paperwork or through the bill and couldn't find it, and then said, well, you know, maybe it'll come to that or something to that effect. It's very disheartening when somebody in that level of authority makes a statement as inaccurate as that. So that's my first point on process. The second thing I'm going to talk about is not necessarily illegal immigration, but unchecked immigration. Many of you know I fly around the world on a weekly basis. I've been doing that for almost 38 years now. I have seen the results in the once pristine cities of Paris or Zurich or name just about any European city of the results of unchecked immigration. When I first started going to these cities in the mid and late 80s, Paris, for example, pristine, inside the Périphérique, gorgeous, never any kind of trash, no nothing. But over the years, over the 38 years that I've been going to Paris, it has the social and the fiscal, and I'll talk about Athens if you really want to talk about fiscal decay. But the societal and fiscal decays of these major cities are just really discouraging. You can't go to one of these cities anymore without seeing in one of the major squares in Paris, inside the main part of the city, where once gorgeous statues or fountains are now covered with graffiti inside the once beautiful city of Paris. Same thing with Zurich. Recently, I just can't get over how these cities have deteriorated. And the comment was made earlier, well, that's not happening here in New Hampshire. I'll tell you something. In the last 3 or 4 years, I've started to see that same societal fiscal decay here in New Hampshire. Up until a few years ago, did you ever see around the cities of Manchester, many of you are from there, graffiti on the bridge abutments? No, they were always pristine. Did you ever see graffiti on all the wooden fencing they have to cut down on the noise? No. We're seeing that same societal decay. Now, I'm not saying that's all on unchecked immigration, but there has been something that has changed in New Hampshire over the last few years, And I can tell you unequivocally, I'm seeing the same thing happen in my great state that I have seen happen into these great cities throughout the world. So I'd be very cautious for saying that it's not happening here. My final point I'm going to state is the Fed's failures at the southern borders. True, you're right. That is the Fed's failures. If they fail, we need to protect our state. These bills that we're talking about are, first of all, not mandates, but they are for, as Representative McDonald's talked about, these are for those committing felonies or serious crimes. This isn't rounding up like the police chief from Manchester stated. So with that, I will support this bill. Thank you. Further comments? Representative Trelevin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. While I very much appreciate your point of view, your knowledge, your information as a world traveler, I must bring us right back to the state of New Hampshire, where we all live. And I must say that after reading this bill, hearing the testimony, reading the amendment, listening to people today, this bill is not ready as far as I'm concerned. It's not concise. It's not clear. I understand many of the points made by several speakers. This is not ready to go before the House, and I will not be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments? Seeing none, I will ask the clerk to call a roll.
SB 132 ought to pass. Vice Chairman Power,
Yes.
Representative Sellers,
Yes.
Clerk votes yes. Representative LaSalle's,
Yes.
Representative Yokella,
No.
Representative Kelly,
Yes.
Representative Arwood,
Yes.
Representative Brown,
Yes.
Representative Cahill,
Yes.
Representative Stavis,
No.
Representative Tatro,
No.
Representative Trelevin,
No.
Representative Gilman,
No.
Representative Majori,
No.
Representative Rung,
No.
Representative Gallagher,
No.
Representative Hicks,
No.
Representative Wheeler,
No.
Representative Priest,
No.
and Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Motion fails 9 to 11.
Thank you. Is there further motions? Representative Majori.
Mr. Chair, I move ITL on Senate Bill 132.
Thank you. Is there a second? Representative Priest, seconds. Would you like to speak to your motion?
No further comment. I think we've said it all.
Okay. Representative Priest.
Yes, I appreciate the effort that's been made by some of the representatives here to clarify once a very ugly bill and make it more palatable. But I do agree that more work needs to be done. And that's why I'm opposing this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Further comments? Seeing none, we'll ask the clerk to call a roll.
SB 132, the motion is ITL. Representative Powers,
No.
Representative Sellers,
No.
Clerk votes no. Representative LaSalle's,
No.
Representative Keller,
No.
Representative Kelly,
No.
Representative Arwood,
No.
Representative Brown,
No.
Representative Cahill,
No.
Representative Stavis,
Yes.
Representative Tatro,
Yes.
Representative Trelevin,
Yes.
Representative Gilman,
Yes.
Representative Majori,
Yes.
Representative Rung,
Yes.
Representative Gallagher,
Yes.
Representative Hicks,
Yes.
Representative Wheeler, Representative Priest,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
No.
10 to 10, Mr. Chairman.
10 to 10, that motion fails. Do we have a further motion? Seeing none, actually, I'm going to have to ask the clerk, not this clerk, the other clerk, where Representative Yokella, do you have a motion? Let's take a 5-minute, 10-minute recess. Please be back at 10:30, 11:30.
Can't move forward with no recommendation. Tie.
Okay, everybody, we're going to get back on this now. Everybody take their seats, please. Oh, Jim. Yes, sir. Got to talk to you after.
Oh, good Lord. That can't be good.
Okay, we're back, and having seen no more motions, we will, this will go to the floor without recommendation. So what I'm looking for is somebody from one side and the other to write the committee reports. I'm assuming on our side it'll be Representative Power. Representative Elward will write it for our side, and Representative Stavis will write for the dissenting side. All right. Well, whatever it's called. Well, from my point of view, it is. All right, so that I believe closes the exec session on SB 132. So, does anybody have anything else? Representative Status. Mike.
What is the required submission date for the reports?
About an hour and a half.
No can do.
I'm kidding. What is today? Wednesday? By Wednesday, 4 o'clock. Friday, 4 o'clock would be great. Thank you. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you for those who sat in. Representative Rung, Representative Wheeler, and Representative Sellers, thank you. And that's all for today. Thanks. Representative LaSalle?
With respect to any scheduling, have we completed our business as far as the committee goes?
As of now, we have, unless for some weird thing, something else comes over. But
Okay.
yeah, as of now, that should complete us. Yeah, well, Representative Powers talking about the retained bills, but those will be in the fall, so most of them. As far as I'm concerned, we are done through when this we finish up here in June. As far as this committee meeting, we're done. Yep. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Well, you read the top of the note, you read the bottom of the note. You did. Oh, fantastic.